Happy new month and welcome to MarketSquare. My name is Oluwak Pelubi Aware and I'm super pumped that you joined in tonight. Let's start off with update with respect to bank recapitalization in Nigeria. The Central Bank of Nigeria some months ago announced an upward review of the capital requirements for the operations of bank, whether commercial, merchant, and non-interest banks in the country. You have on the screen the circular circulated by the Central Bank of Nigeria dated March 28, 2024 with respect to that. Now, the last time there was a recapitalization of banks in Nigeria was about 20 years ago when banks increased their capital base to 25 billion naira. At the time, 89 money deposit banks were reduced to 25 banks as a result of mergers and acquisition, while some had to downgrade their operational licenses, because there is a particular amount that has to be raised if one is to operate at a particular level. And so banks that couldn't raise that amount of money had to downgrade their operational licenses. Now, on the back of the free fall of Naira early in the year, amidst domestic and global shocks, very early this year, 2024, the CBN made the move to push banks to raise their capital base. Now, commercial banks with international authorization, like you will see on the screen right now, were told to increase their capital base to 500 billion naira. 500 billion naira. National banks were told to raise around 200 billion naira as capital base, while those with regional authorization were expected to achieve a 50 billion naira capital floor there. Non-interest banks with national and regional authorizations were also asked to increase their capital to around 20 billion naira and 10 billion naira respectively, just like you have on the screen. Now, all of this they must do before March 31st, 2026. That's like a 2-year time frame for the banks to be able to reach this. Remember, the circular was posted on the 28th of March 2024, and by the 31st of March 2026, banks are supposed to have raised that amount. And you have on the screen as well an image that shows it showed already the banks and the billions they have to raise as soon as possible. And guess what? Banks have swift into action. Now, as it stands, there are more than 20 banks in Nigeria that we need to raise extra capital within 2 years to meet the central bank's new threshold. On the screen, you have the banks and what amount they have to reach. You have Zenith Bank there and other banks. You have UBA, you have Wema Bank, you have First Bank, and how much they still need to raise within the time frame given. So far, we haven't seen mergers and acquisitions yet, but what we have seen is that banks are issuing new shares, some trying to attract investors and also trying to get some additional funding from existing shareholders. Just to see what's on the screen, you have the current capital base of banks, and then you also have the amount needed for them to cover. You have FCMB there, you have UBA there, you have Zenith Bank there, you have Access Bank there, you have GT Bank there, and other banks, and how much they still need to raise before 31st of March 2024. But let's start today's show by talking about the updates with respect to this by looking at what's happening in the different banks. So I think I have 4 to 5 banks that I will be talking about what they have done so far so good. Remember, this is designed to be the update with respect to directive by the Central Bank of Nigeria for banks to recapitalize. Now we start with First Bank of Nigeria. The first bank in Nigeria, from as far back as 1894. You have on the screen an image that has the picture of the first building in 1894 of First Bank of Nigeria. And I guess there's a reason they are called First Bank of Nigeria. I have on the screen, you see how the building looked at the time they started operation in Nigeria in 1894. Now, the First Bank of Nigeria Holdings, which is a parent company of the banking giant First Bank, has secured the approval of shareholders to raise up to 300 billion naira through public share offering, through selling new shares directly to a small group of institutional investors, and through existing shareholders getting at a discount. And as I go on, you will hear me say more often, the idea that these banks are giving their existing customers, their existing shareholders, some discount if they intend to buy more shares there. Okay, and that's what First Bank is doing as well with respect to raising the money as declared by the CBN the CBN governor and the team there. We'll also go to GITCO, that's Guarantee Trust Holdings PLC, which owns Guarantee Trust Bank. Guarantee Trust Bank is one of the banks that I give kudos to when it comes to the building, when it comes to their structure. It looks very homey in every sense. GITCO announced plans to raise up to $750 million in capital by joining other banks in boosting their capital base and capital reserve, as declared by the CBN team with respect to raising capital base. And all of this is just to ensure that the financial system in Nigeria is stronger than it used to be before. Regarding its target investors, GITCO said the proposed offering was structured as an institution offering targeted and eligible investors, also for retail offerings within Nigeria. There's also the place for international investors to also put in their money in GITCO to help them raise the capital base as declared by the CBN team. Also, GITCO shares will be issued at a level that is required in Nigeria and also internationally in international platforms where international investors can plug in their funds and get money out of it. It's just a way to raise money by every legal means possible. I don't think it's a bad move anyway. I think it's a good move that GITCO has made. So we've spoken about First Bank, we've spoken about GITCO. Let's talk about Access Bank now. Access Bank here, we know about Access Bank's capital raising effort for the Nigerian bank. The Nigerian Bank Recapitalization Program, as declared by the CBN. In March 2024, rather, Access Bank Holdings announced a $1.5 billion capital raising program for the entire group, aiming to include a right issue of ordinary shares for around 365 billion naira, specifically for Access Bank. Now, remember that every time I mention a figure here for either of the banks, know for sure that it's supposed to be the minimum. So it means they could raise higher. Maybe you're confused as to the fact that I said Access Bank declared that they wanted to raise $1.5 billion. Now, the idea of raising money by the CBN is that the banks can raise a minimum of that. Okay, banks can raise a minimum. So it means some banks will raise even more than the amount stipulated. And we'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk about the UBA, United Bank of Africa, known as UBA, got approval from shareholders in March 2024 to raise capital through multiple methods to entice existing UBA shareholders. They have given existing shareholders the chance to buy additional shares at a discounted price. I said that already when I was talking about First Bank, how that First Bank as well has given existing shareholders the privilege of buying more shares, getting more shares at a discounted price. And just to make some reference to First Bank again, last week, it was said that, last week or 2 weeks ago, it was said that Mr. Femi Otedola bought shares, a lot of shares, and just made his place known as the highest owner of shares at First Bank Nigeria. Just to make it very firmly known that he has a stake in the operations happening at First Bank of Nigeria. Now let's talk about Fidelity Bank. The bank aims to raise a total of 127.1 billion naira through this combined offer and has opted for a hybrid approach to raise capital, combining two methods. Let me just put this straight out here as to how I got to even know this. Mr. Bayo Adeyinka, who is a top person at Fidelity Bank, did a video respect this, telling people as to why they should come into Fidelity Bank and get their shares there. First, Fidelity Bank has offered existing shareholders the right to buy additional shares at a discounted price. And I said this already before now, how that you've seen First Bank do the same, you've seen UBA did the same, and we're also seeing Fidelity Bank do the same, giving discounts to shareholders, existing shareholders, to encourage them to come in and buy proportionate to their existing holdings there. And this allows existing shareholders to maintain their ownership stake in the bank if they choose to participate. The second thing they are doing is to offer new shares to the general public at a slightly higher price. This broadens the investor base and brings in fresh funds into the system. This strategy benefits Fidelity Bank in several ways. It will increase the capital base of the bank. The raised funds will directly contribute to strengthening Fidelity Bank's capital base, enabling them to be able to comply with the CBN's new requirement. It will also enhance market position of the bank. A successful capital raise can improve investor confidence and potentially boost Fidelity Bank's overall market position. The additional capital also allows Fidelity Bank to pursue its growth plans, such as regional expansion, expanding in terms of technology, also helping them to diversify the business, as mentioned by the CEO of Fidelity Bank, with the attempt to raise about 127.10 billion naira capital base to strengthen market position and global presence. Now, if somebody who has been listening to me from the beginning is wondering, I thought it was 500 billion naira they were asked to raise. So why did Pelumi mention 127.1 billion naira? Now, the idea is they didn't have zero account. They didn't have zero capital base before now, did they? Yeah, so that may be the amount they have left to cover, just like we put out on the screen the other time by Repo. Maybe the amount they have to cover before they are able to hit the mark. Let's talk about Zenith Bank. Zenith Bank is another Nigerian bank undertaking capital raising efforts to be able to meet the requirement of the CBN as well, as said. Now, in May 2024, stakeholders signified their go-ahead for the bank to pursue various capital raising methods. Now, there is a tendency that we might see Zenith Bank selling shares to the general public in the Nigerian stock exchange there. Then the bank can also raise capital by issuing securities in markets outside Nigeria. This could involve bonds. It could involve other instruments, just like other banks are doing already. For me, it will be interesting to see what unfolds in the coming days as other banks go public with their offers. But for now, we just hope that I'll give you update as soon as I have update with respect to what banks are doing what, and just to let you know what's available, and whichever one you want to go for, you're good to go. But be rest assured that all of this is insured, and whatever amount you put into either of these banks to help them raise capital would go a long way. In fact, an investor was telling me how that this is a good time to plug into banks, to plug into the system and make money on a passive level. Isn't that? Put your money there, make money on a passive level. So that's it with respect to the bank capitalization update. Let's now do the numbers. The all-share index dropped by 0.04% to close at 100,020.83 points, down from 0.67% gain at 100,057.49 points as of Friday last week. As such, investors lost around 20.74 billion naira, bringing the market capitalization to 56.58 trillion naira with a year-to-date return of 33.76%. UCAP was the most traded in volume, contributing about 9.70%, while Link Assure and ICO followed behind. The value chart shows that UCAP contributed the most with a 19.86% share. Geregu and Jitco followed closely behind. On the foreign exchange market side, the NatFest rate appreciated by 1.75% from 1,514.31 naira per dollar to 1,488.21 naira per dollar, while the Bureau de change rate also appreciated by 0.40% from 1,503 naira per dollar to 1,497 naira per dollar. Speaking on the value of the Nigerian currency, which is naira, the naira has emerged as the worst performing currency in the first half of 2024, meaning naira has emerged as the worst performing currency as calculated from January up until June. Now, this is more surprising as in March, the Naira had emerged as the best performing currency in the world, a feat which was reversed the next month. That was published by Goldman there. You have it on the screen right now as to what was published with respect to the fact that Naira was the best. Naira was the best performing currency in the month of April 2024. Goldman sees Nigerian Naira extending world-beating rally. It was everywhere. We're excited. Even I said it on the show at the time, how that this would in many ways influence the many contribution and investor confidence in the country. But that feat was reversed in the next month. Now, according to a report by Bloomberg last week, the reduction for this rating is tied to the fact that Nigeria devalued its currency, also insufficient dollar liquidity, and market volatility. Now, speaking of volatility, the currency was volatile between mid-April 2024 and May 2024 due to some level of imbalance between the demand and supply for the green bank, and also the fact that we didn't quite at the time have enough in our reserve. And so it was not very balanced, because at the time we had not, a lot of improvement had not gotten to the side of the dollar supply. So that affected us in many ways. Now, if you track data from FMDQ, the Naira weakened for 9 straight days and stood at 1,510 Naira per dollar as at the close of business on Thursday last week. According to a PwC economic report on Nigeria, the Naira depreciated against the dollar by 67.8% from an average of 461.1 Naira in May 2023 to 1,433.80 Naira in May 2024. And that's quite a difference. If in May 2023, a dollar to Naira was around 461.1 Naira per dollar, and now it's now exchanges for 1,433.80 Naira per dollar. That tells you that a lot has happened from that time up until now. If you calculate that, that was the time the president was inaugurated, and not too long from that time, the CBN governor was appointed. So you could already tell that the policies that was implemented at the time has had the spillover effect on many things, including the rating by Bloomberg. Now, apart from the Naira, Egypt's pound and Ghana cedis were also on the list of the world's worst performing currency. From January to June 2024, pound of Lebanon was also noted as one of the worst performing currencies, as it is presently undergoing an economic crisis and witnessing dollarization. While the Naira has indirectly been undervalued and has seen significant adjustment in the last couple of months, the supply of dollars needs to improve for the economy to be approved and also to grow in that light. On the other side, on the oil side, earnings have dropped as well on the oil side, and there have been issues with respect to Dangote refinery scheduled to kick off production in July 2024. Remember when I was speaking about this Dangote refinery, I mentioned that it was supposed to have kicked up before now, but Mr. Dangote promised the fact that we should begin to see that refinery produce petrol in the month of July 2024. But as it stands now, given the fact that there are still issues with respect to marketers making things difficult for Dangote to be able to get fuel and all of the issues around that, it's only expected that the government can step into that space there and get things settled, because this is affecting our rating in the world. And Bloomberg is not a Nigerian platform. Okay, it's a platform from outside the country, and investors are watching things, taking note of happenings and ratings to be able to know what country they can plug in their resources and make things happen here. Also, more borrowings by the Nigerian government and spendings by the government have contributed to a potential currency depreciation to manage the debt we have at the moment. Although, as announced in the last episode, the foreign exchange reserve hit its highest figure in June 2024. Given that the CBN is determined to achieve price discovery and attract liquidity to the country, it's only expected that the fact that we have more money in our foreign reserve will increase the value of Naira in the coming days. And this is just so true. As much as we have more money coming to the country from remittances from outside the country, a lot of exporting happening. And when you export a lot of goods, we have more money coming. Also, when Dangote refinery begins to work with respect to petrol, we should begin to see more money coming to the country. And then I can now talk about rating, but ratings don't matter in many sense in terms of the fact that what is real is real. Even when you said it was the best performing currency, some of us knew that it was doing well, but we knew that it would take a while for things to stabilize in the country, and the reality is now before us. So And just like I mentioned before, and I have that Naira appreciated yesterday against dollar, both on the BOE exchange rate on yes, and also on the NatFest rate. It's only expected that this will continue in the coming days with respect to the policies that have been dished out by the CBN every single day. In fact, if you go to the CBN's website, it feels like there's something coming up every single day with respect to helping to stabilize the economy and make things work out. Just like I wrapped up the last session last week, I mentioned that there would be the MPC meeting, the Monetary Policy Committee meeting later this month of July. And there's a fear that the CBN might increase the monetary policy rate again. But also, I know before that time, they may look at certain figures, certain things, and then make a decision as to whether they want to increase it, keep it at what it is, or break it down. On the show today, I have mentioned about the recapitalization of banks, the attempt to capitalize by banks. I spoke about First Bank, spoke about Access Bank, spoke about UBA, also spoke about Zenith Bank as well, and they did not forget to mention about Fidelity Bank. And I also mentioned to you some of the factors that may have contributed to the poor rating of Nigerian Naira by Bloomberg, calling Nigeria's Naira as the worst performing currency in the world, as estimated from January up until June. Thank you for joining me today on the show. I always look forward to you joining me every time on the show. Do well to follow us on all our social media platforms, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, even on TikTok, to get updates every time we post a video. My name is Oluwapelumi Awe. If I come your way next time, keep it up.